Hello, my name is Wayne Browder. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 6 of Examining Fictional Heroes. In this episode, we are discussing the concept of knowing yourself. You have to know yourself, your beliefs, what you're capable of, how far you are willing to go in order to defend the things that you believe in. To that end, I have several excerpts from several books. So we'll jump right in with this volume of short stories by Louis L'Amour called End of the Drive. This short story is called The Lonesome Gods, and it is The Lonesome Gods later became a novel, but the character from this story, Jacob Allmeyer, was not in the novel. This character was the sole survivor of a boat wreck on the Colorado River in 1807. He was a man who had walked much alone, a man sensitive to the wilderness and the mores of other peoples and other times. And now he walked into the desert with only the miles before him. Jacob Allmeyer was a big man, powerful in the chest and broad in the shoulders, a fighter by instinct, and a man who would, by the nature of him, die hard. He was also a man of ironic, self-deriding humor, and it was like him to have no illusions now. Curiosity triumphed, or rather, his way of life triumphed. Had it not always been so with him and those others who preceded him? Was it not curiosity more than desire for gain that led them on? And now, in what might be the waning hours of life, it was no time to change. Sorry. Finally, he got up then, because it was his nature to get up. Next, I'll take an excerpt from the actual novel, The Lonesome Gods, by Louis L'Amour. And this from the character Alfreda. Men destroy what they do not understand, as they destroyed the Son of God when he chose to walk among them. I do not wish to be understood. I wish to be left alone. So he definitely has every confidence in himself and does not wish to be bothered. Next, a few excerpts from the book Solomon Kane by Robert E. Howard. If I haven't said this before, all of the Solomon Kane stories were short stories. This first excerpt is from the story Skulls in the Stars. Of one thing Cain was sure. There would be no hunting of him across the dreary moors. No screaming and fleeing to be dragged down again and again. If he must die, he would die in his tracks, his wounds in front. This from the story, and my favorite Solomon Kane story, Moon of Skulls. He was true to his ideals of justice and right. Such was Solomon Kane. And this last one from the short story, The Hills of the Dead. Deep in Cain stirred the spirit of the crusader the fire of the zealot, the fanatic who devotes his life to battling the powers of darkness. So everything that Cain does relates to the battle of good versus evil. Next, I'll pull a few about John Carter from A Princess of Mars. I am not given to needless worrying, something I'm sure we could all learn. However, I am not prone to sensitiveness, and the following of a sense of duty, wherever it may lead, has always been a kind of fetish with me throughout my life. I do not believe that I am made of the stuff which constitutes heroes, because in all the hundreds of instances that my voluntary acts have placed me face to face with death, I cannot recall a single one where any alternative step to that I took occurred to me until many hours later. My mind is evidently so constituted that I am subconsciously forced into the path of duty without recourse to tiresome mental processes. However that may be, I have never regretted that cowardice is not optional with me. And lastly, from this book, I have ever been prone to seek adventure and to investigate and experiment where wiser men would have left well enough alone. Next, two about the character Conan from The Hour of the Dragon by Robert E. Howard. And Conan had just escaped from the dungeons in the city of Belverus and just escaped the palace. Besides, he was not one to skulk and hide. An open fight or an open chase, either suited his temperament better. The horse was tiring fast. Conan recognized the grim finality of his position. He sensed an inexorable driving fate behind all this. He could not escape. He was as much a captive as he had been in the pits of Belverus. But he was no son of the Orient to yield passively to what seemed inevitable. If he could not escape, he would at least take some of his foes into eternity with him. He turned into a wide thicket of larches that masked a slope, looking for a place to turn at bay. Next, a few from El Barak and Other Desert Adventures by Robert E. Howard. I could be pronouncing that wrong, as I've never heard it pronounced. The first an exchange between he and his friend Baber Khan concerning the fact that the Emir is fixing to move against Baber Khan. He'll bring 5,000 men with artillery, warned Gordon. He'll burn core and take your head back to Kabul. Inshallah, agreed Baber Khan placidly, indomitably fatalistic. As so often in the past, Gordon fought down a rising anger at this invincible Oriental characteristic. Every instinct of his strenuous nature was a negation of this inert philosophy. Later in this story, by the way, Three-Bladed Doom. Gordon, before replying, kicked a divan up before the dais and settled himself comfortably on it, with his feet propped on a velvet footstool. He had not established his prestige in the Orient by meek bearing or timid behavior, where another man might have tiptoed, hat in hand and heart in mouth. Gordon strode with heavy boots and heavy hand, and because he was El Barak, he lived where other men died. His attitude was no bluff. He was ready at all times to back up his play with hot lead and cold steel, and men knew it, just as they knew that he was the most dangerous man with any sort of weapon between Cairo and Peking. Finally, from the story Swords of the Hills, and in some books it's actually called The Lost Valley of Iskander. There was about one chance in 10,000 of his ever getting through alive. But he had known it was a desperate quest when he started, and long odds had never balked Francis Xavier Gordon. Pardon me, I'm very sorry about that. Next, from this collection, Conan the Warrior, The Story Beyond the Black River by Robert E. Howard. My favorite Conan story, by the way. I'm not going out of my way looking for devils, but I wouldn't step out of my path to let one go by. Next, we have one from White Fang by Jack London. Any of you who are familiar with White Fang or The Call of the Wild, you know that these stories center around dogs. However, he does know men as well, and the concepts that he writes about apply to men as well. One cannot violate the promptings of one's nature without having that nature recoil upon itself. Such a recoil is like that of a hair, made to grow out from the body, turning unnaturally upon the direction of its growth and growing into the body. A rankling, festering thing of hurt. Next, an excerpt from Zane Grey's Riders of the Purple Sage, from the character Lassiter. I'm a man of strange beliefs and ways of thinking, and I seem to see into the future and feel things hard to explain. I can only say if you have that, you have it, you know it. You know what he's talking about. Barnabas Sackett in the Sackett series referred to that as the second sight. Next, from Tarzan the Magnificent by Edgar Rice Burroughs. The first about Tarzan, the next from Tarzan. The voice was low and deep. It questioned, but it also commanded. The stranger felt that. It was the well-modulated, assured voice of a man who was always obeyed. You do not know Mafka, said Wood. I know Africa, and I know myself, replied the ape man simply. There was no bravado in his tone, but absolute assurance. Tarzan has no doubts about himself and his abilities. Finally, from Taggart by Louis L'Amour. This from the beginning of the book, actually about a man by the name of Adam Stark. A contemplative man by nature, experience had taught him how man may be deluded by hope, and so he smoked his pipe through, considering all aspects of the problem. Moreover, Adam Stark was a man who knew his own strength, his own capabilities. Lastly, Adam Stark knew himself thoroughly. So, it is important that one know themselves. As I said before, all these things come through trial and error. And they are all part of a process of learning to improve yourself. Thank you for listening. I appreciate any likes, dislikes, comments, criticisms, follows are great. And I thank you for your time. Have a good night.